Good morning, everybody. This is Chad again. I made a few videos on ESTJs versus ENTJs, and today I really wanted to talk about school and kind of how ENTJs and INTJs, any NTJ or any extroverted thinking type plays in the school role versus the introverted thinking type, and why I have a problem with today's education system. Okay, so you've got INTJs and ENTJs, very dominant extroverted thinkers, more so ENTJs and ESTJs. But you've got about, I would say, I don't know off the top of my head, but I would say probably six types that use extroverted thinking, whether in their a dominant function or their auxiliary function. I would say probably about 6 to 8 types, probably 6. And without thinking about it, of course. So 6 types. And the rest are either introverted thinkers or it's at the bottom of their function list. This is why this creates a problem. Okay, so you've got these types that are using extroverted thinking in school, which is all about creating logical order and creating sequential information and quantitative analysis, that type of thing, based off what we consider truths. TE versus TI. School is naturally going to be more difficult for TI users than TE users. The problem is, the way the school is, it makes it seem like that TI people are stupid. And TI people are not stupid. They're actually, in my mind, a lot more brilliant than us TE users. Hard for me to admit that for the fact that I am an ENTJ, but the way that society is and culture is going to base intelligence off how you do in school. Okay, so school's work ethic. Now, keep in mind that no matter how hard, no matter how fast you get the grades, how fast you get a high GPA is not important, but ultimately how hard you work. So anything I say here is really subjective in the sense of that anybody can get good grades in school. It's just the TI users are going to have to work a little harder than, say, TE users. TE users like ESTJs and ENTJs can kind of sleep and get through school. And I mean that not in a literal sense, but in the sense that it seems like they don't have to try. My whole life, everybody told me I was smart, and I actually assumed it until probably in the last 5 years when I realized that there's different types of people and different types of thinking. TI types go into understanding every detail of everything that they focus on. But their focus is going to be more single point. A TI user is likely to have total mastery in one area versus a TE user who has more of a broad understanding with depth, but not to the level of depth that a TI user would have. In a sense, a TI user is going to be more specialized. A TE user is going to be quick, but less specialized because their information is objective and they're quick, they're conclusive based or conclusion based. TI users are detail based. So an ENTJ is going to know a lot about a lot of different subjects, but a lot doesn't cover everything. A TI user will always question the very foundation of those facts that we gather. A TI user is going to question, let's say that we have a school assignment, right? And there's a particular assignment in school that requires an understanding based on what the book says, okay? So if the book says that 1 + 1 is 2, this is a very fundamental example. Everybody kind of accepts this, but fundamentally, okay, here's the process. A TE user is going to get 2 and accept that 1 + 1 is 2 without question. A TE user is going to say, okay, it must be true because they've done a lot of studies on this. We're going to assume it's truth. A TI user, on the other hand, is going to be, well, why is that so? Say a TI user is going to question that truth in itself because A, they don't understand why 1 + 1 is 2. And a TE user, although they don't understand why 1 + 1 is 2, they don't really care. They accept it as truth and they gathered that, they collected it, and they stored it away, and we're ready to go on. TE users are like, move forward, move forward, move forward. A TI user is going to question it in a basis of understanding. They want to understand why 1 + 1 is 2. A TE user has to understand the detail enough to form a conclusion, and they're conclusion based. They want to finalize the conclusion. Once they gather enough details to conclude something that may not be 100% truth, but it's true enough, a TE user is going to accept it as truth. And a TI user is always in a quest for truth. A TI user wants to know truth based off subjective information, their own interpretation of that. So that a TI user has to have their subjective information involved. So a TI user is more likely to test, trial and error, trial and error, trial and error. So let's put this algebraically. If it were 1 plus x equals 2, a TI user would actually go through numbers of variables to determine what X really is, and they're fine with that. They enjoy the act because they are extroverted sensors. They enjoy the actions a lot more than TE. TE we don't like the action. We don't really care about the action. We want the end result. So we want 2. We want the answer 2. We want the answer to be a certain number, and then based on conclusive evidence, we will assume that is true. A TI user doesn't care about the conclusion. They do. They're still goal-oriented, depending on who they are and what type they are, but they are more interested and enjoy more of the element of trial and error. So they're more on the journey is more important than the ends kind of thing. A TE cares only about the end, generally speaking, the conclusion. And the TI does care about the conclusion, but they want to make sure the details are correct. And that has to be subjective. So TI will test and test and test until the TI is convinced themselves that the details are true to form the conclusion. I know that's kind of complex, so I'm doing my best here to ad-lib this and kind of explain it. But so getting back to school, school has what we have universal truths. We have truths that dictate a certain class is going to say that this is this, therefore this is this. And a TI user is going to get hung up because the details may not be necessarily true. The details may be actually pretty false, such as, I can't give you an example right now, but such as, let's say that they just have a universal acceptance. Because of many studies we've done, we assume that this is true. A TI is going to get hung up on those details and then say, we can't form that conclusion because the details aren't 100% accurate or subjectively true. I don't see them as true because my personal experience, my personal feelings, my personal thought process says that it's different, says that that's not exactly true, says that I've experienced something different. So a TI will have a clash. A TE person will just let it go and say, okay, my subjective information doesn't matter. They consider this true. So even though I had that experience, I'm not really interested in figuring out why that was that way. I got the conclusion, this is what's universally accepted as true, and boom, let's move forward. So we're very conclusive based. A TI is not. In this reason, I'm a fan of TI people because they want to master the subject. They want to understand every element of it. So you get a INTP, an ENTP, and they're more likely to know the ins and outs of each subject more so than a TE user. And that's why TI users are just, to me, they're just brilliant because they're great to talk to about their subject of expertise. If you try to talk to them about something they're not interested in or something they didn't study, they'll just ponder the fact and question it and sit there and be in deep thought. While a TE user will gather some facts that they've gathered in the past and form a conclusion and then try to spit out something pretty quickly. A TI user will sit there and say, let's see. Well, let me think about that, and I'll get back to you. A TE user hates saying, I don't know. We have to have a conclusion. We don't like being conclusionless. TI don't care about having a conclusion. As long as the details are correct, that's where they're at. So they say, here's what I have proven. Boom. A and B, I've proven both A and B. And so subjectively, I understand these, and these make perfect subjective sense to me. So C is the answer. And they still form a conclusion, but it's based on the fact that their two details or the two facts they've used were subjective. So they had a personal experience in that with a personal opinion or personal, something to do with what they've interpreted as in their personal analysis. TE, we think that any subjective information naturally tarnishes the truth. They think subjective actually is the clear, and you can't take it at face value. You have to understand the details. So TE, we take things at face value. TI, we don't. They don't take things at face value. They see things as need to be proven. So TIs are great analysts, especially TI dominant types, such as INTP or ENTP. They're excellent analysts. They're able to analyze things that beyond what TE users analyze. They have to reach the full range of understanding of all things that are involved in that subject. So they're very, very pinpoint focused. Anything that I would say is introverted is going to be a lot more specific. Anything that is extroverted is going to be more broad. So that's true pretty much, I think, according to any of the cognitive functions. It's going to be very specific if it's introverted. So versus broad. Like extroverted feeling is about the masses, extroverted sensing is about everything around you, extroverted intuition is about all the objects around you, and extroverted thinking is about all the details, all the logic that's around you. Introverted thinking, on the other hand, is about your interpretation of a specific detail or specific logical analysis. Introverted intuition is more about your specific possibilities related, your specific impressions of that particular object. Introverted sensing is more about your specific subjective relationship with that object. And then your introverted feeling is more about your impersonal, interpreted feelings or values based on what you perceive feeling-wise. Or judge feeling-wise, rather. So anyway, school, to summarize my point here, school is going to be difficult because it's a totally TE world. School is going to be difficult for those types who are TIs. It doesn't mean they're stupid. In fact, like I said, TIs have a level of mastery that I don't think TEs are really naturally ever going to get. Like an ISTP and ESTPs are obsessed with the action in itself. So it's likely you're going to find an ESTP or an ISTP do the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again, more so the ISTP than even the ESTP. And they're just going to keep doing it not for an end result, but because they enjoy the action so much, they're going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. And they're going to have a level of mastery that I don't think anybody else really attains. ESTP, ISTP, both. ESTPs are extremely athletic. So I'm willing to bet, here's my TE thinking, because of my flawed facts here, I'm going to say that in a very loosely. I'm willing to bet that most athletes are ESTPs. Not all of them, but most of them, or ISTPs even, because of the fact that they have played the sport over and over and over and over and over and over again in a routine, and they have achieved a sense of mastery, especially the greats. Any great athlete, I think, is probably either an STP type, because they have that extroverted sensing. That extroverted sensing creates a very dominant awareness of what's around them, backed by the TI, which is understanding that exact action and that detail. So here you are with the extroverted sensation, looking at everything around you, all the possibilities around you, and you take a specific object. Let's say you take this shoehorn, right? You take a very specific object, and now you're going to understand why this thing actually works in the environment. So I've focused. Now the TI is going to break this object down. So the SE takes everything in the environment. The TI picks a particular object, breaks it down, understands its conclusion. So let's say it's a specific play in football or soccer or whatever it is. The TI type is going to analyze it and make sure the details are true to be conclusive. So that's mastery for those two types. And according to Michael Pierce, that's what he calls them, the masters, the STP types. So they're very, very, very mastery focused. So they're more likely to get hung up on the details in school, and they're not going to say, well, this doesn't make any sense. As a TE user, I get frustrated sitting around in class naturally by people who ask, well, that doesn't make any sense. I'm assuming a lot of those types will be TI types, because to me it makes complete sense, not because I perceived it faster, because they spit out a truth that the TI types would question, and they get hung up on that questioning, while the TE are like, okay, hey, we got this. In conclusion of this, I believe that the school education system needs to be totally reformed. It needs to be reformed in the sense of accommodating different types and being able to educate different types. They should have a way and a method that I haven't thought about this a lot, but I really have put a little bit of thought into this, and they should have a method that allows TI types to thrive. Because TI types struggle with feeling, they struggle with feeling either superior than school and they're willing not to learn because they feel like the school is wrong, or they feel like they're stupid and everybody tells them they're stupid because of their lack of interest in the subject, because the subject is seemingly so false. And they can go either way, but the school education system is not designed for them, and it makes it very tough for them. Yes, the real world is a TE-focused world, and there's things that you have to know in the world, such as like accounting. This is the way it is. Or, such as business, or such as very logical based principles that work in the external environment. So it does teach them to understand that, but a TI type needs to understand that they're not stupid and they're not intellectually challenged, and they see the world in a different way, through a different lens, their subjective lens. So they need to understand that the school education system needs to be able to hone the abilities of the TI, because the TIs, they really are the great thinkers. They're the great ponderers. TI dominant types, like INTPs and ENTPs. I'm telling you, these two types are just, ENTP is not really TI dominant, I'm sorry. But the INTP specifically is a TI dominant type, so they are going to have a very difficult time in the school environment, and they're actually, to me, INTPs are the most logical and brilliant people, because they think so differently, and they ponder, and they're able to come up with grand conclusions of the world, and things that just blow my mind when I listen to them talk. I'm like, wow, you've really come up with something significant. And but naturally as a TE and naturally as an ENTJ, I want to take that knowledge and go apply it in the real world. An INTP is just more likely to sit there and go, well, that is the truth. I've now concluded that is true. Okay, so they've pondered this. They've thought out all the details. They've analyzed this to a level that none of us understand. But Einstein's a good example. I mean, just a full understanding, every detail. If you ever ask a TI user, like, why, they're going to know. A TE user is going to say, because this proved it, or this study said it, or the details don't matter. Here's a conclusion, because that's what I was taught. A TE user is going to be very hard-headed in what they think is true. A TI user, on the other hand, is going to be more focused on actually being able to prove their conclusion, more so based on subjective fact and things they've personally experienced or things they've personally learned. So that is a huge difference between the two types, and why school's a challenge for a lot of types that are use TI. That's half the types that use TI in my understanding. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I don't really have to try very hard in school. My focus is else in my business. It's focused on all kinds of things. So I don't really focus and try very hard in school. I just naturally kind of get a grip on it. Versus other types, which may look at me and go, wow, I wish I could do that. I mean, I don't understand it. And it's frustrating because I know how much potential these other types have. I've talked to them. They have great ideas, just amazing ideas. And the school system kind of punishes them for having such outside-of-the-box thinking and such questions. And the power of questions is really what gives people power. Questions is the ultimate tool for power. And like knowledge is power, questions are the road to knowledge. And to me, the school education system is supposed to be about knowledge, but here you are punishing people who use TI because they think outside the box. To me, it's not fair to these types. It's not fair to half these types. And then out of those types, people who use TI at the very bottom are going to do horrible in school, like absolutely horrible, because they're not thinking logically. They're thinking based off feeling and emotion. And then when they do think, it's going to be introverted thinking. That's where it's tough. It's going to be tough. And it doesn't mean it has nothing to do with your IQ. It really doesn't. It has to do with the ability to use TE. And yes, they can get through school. Yes, many of the TI users have got excellent GPAs. But they've worked very hard for it. And it doesn't make it impossible, but why should one have to work harder for something that I think should be universally seen as what should be what should allow all types to thrive. And yes, that's idealistic. Yes, that's probably not possible, but I think there should be different conditioning for each type to master who they are instead of trying to framework them into something they are not. Taking that TI and telling them it's wrong or it's bad to think that way, to me seems punishing on these types, and it may lead to self-depreciation. They may feel like, hey, why am I not doing well in school? I try, and I think it's just unfair ultimately to those types. And being able to help them with those types, I feel like, is super important. Being able to reform the education system and teaching these types how to harness that TI and make it succeed. So anyway, that's my message for today, and why school is difficult for particular types, especially those who use TI.